Hello to our listeners. Welcome to the Municipal Bill, where we are talking about municipal finances today. So we've got a special guest. Her name is Marelize Fourie, and she has been in the local government sector for close to 51 years. So she started in the 1970s working for the city of Pretoria. So Marelize has seen it all through the transitional phase up to the post-1994 establishment of local government transitional councils, up to coalition governments. So we are very privileged. And the one thing that I really find very interesting about Marelize is that she's an accountant by profession who ended up turning into a politician.
Oh, but I didn't play politics.
How did you manage that?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's simple. When you're in finance, 1 and 1 is 2. You can turn the 1 around, upside down, sideways, it's still 2. So if you focus on finance as a numbers game, you don't have to play politics.
And don't they say that politics, though, is about the distribution of resources?
Exactly.
So who best to really focus on
really
that?
focus on that. Yeah, Marelize, as you know, I mean, we are in 25 years of local government, because if we substantively locate the post-apartheid local government system, actually it was formulated, around the reforms, the legislative reforms in the late 1990s, up to the finalization of the Municipal Finance Management Act in 2003.
Yeah.
So it's been a long road, and we thought it is a very imperative time in 25 years to really reflect about local government. But not just only reflecting about local government, but actually talking about the nuts and bolts of local government, how local government works. And our topic really wants to concentrate and zoom into local government finances. Because, people will say that, like what Municipal articulated, that I'm getting this municipal bill, I'm paying my rates and taxes every month, I'm paying for these trading services. But what do I get in return? What do I get in return, and where does that money go to, and how is that money accounted for, and where do citizens actually participate in the budgeting processes and actually see exactly how much money is being allocated for particular services, whether it's for infrastructure, water, upgrading of roads, energy, etc. So we really want to get to the crux of it to understand the finances of local government.
Help me help our parents.
Yeah. Yeah, well, very interesting. Firstly, I think municipalities are very, very complex. That's the first comment that I would like to make. If you just look at the Constitution, it lists 37 different services that is the responsibility of local government. And those 37 services would have sub-services as well aligned to that. So the business becomes very complicated. That's the first thing. The second thing is it is dependent on very few resources which is supposed to carry this municipality. Now, firstly, you're the biggest source if you supply electricity, would be your revenue out of electricity, and the other trading services, which is water and sewage and disposal, right? So, but that is not the main income because trading services covers costs of providing that service, and in most instances, a municipality technically would be allowed to make a small profit. That's all. So although it's a big income of the municipality as shown on the budget, it contributes very little to other services. So if you look at the total picture, property rates are the most, the biggest income for local government. They get equitable share, metropolitan municipalities get a cut of the fuel levy, but property rates are the most important. And it's an unencumbered source. That's important.
What are property rates?
What are property rates? It is a tax.
Okay.
It is a tax on the value of your property.
Okay, so if my property is worth R1 million, I'm taxed more than a person whose property is worth 500,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's based on the value of the property, and the act that drives the property rates requires municipalities every 4 years or shorter to do a revaluation.
Okay.
And there's a whole process of appointment of valuers and all of that to ensure that it's professionals that has to do that, to ensure that the market price that they give you is a fair value. And it's supposed to be the amount of money that a willing buyer will pay a willing seller.
Yes.
That's supposed to be the value that the municipality has.
So let me ask a question. So, I mean, my parents are in a township and Enanda, and most of those properties, I doubt that if there is a property that's worth more than 750,000 rand in our township, do they still charge property rates on, say, your RDP houses and those kind of things?
Well, most of the time RDP houses could most probably fall within the category of poorest of the poor. And a municipality is supposed to have an indigent policy.
Okay.
Because you know that the government says that's why they technically give you an equitable share.
Okay.
It's because you have to pay free basic services of people who can't afford.
Oh, okay.
So if you are registered as poorest of the poor, you are entitled to a certain amount of electricity free in a month and a certain amount of water free in a month, and you would get a rebate on your property rates in total, and you would also get a free sanitary services and rubbish removal. That's part of that program. So if the municipality does that right, every single individual household that falls within the category as determined by the policy of the municipality would qualify for free basic services.
Okay. So let me just ask. So the free basic services, is it the same throughout whether I'm in NICE now or I am in KSD in Mthatha?
No, every municipality. The government gives a minimum level, and then a municipality can decide whether they want to increase the level. So I'll take an example. Electricity, I think, is 100 kilowatt hours a month. Which is sufficient to cover the very basic. And then
is
I
the
think
water still 6 kiloliters?
but certain municipalities, for instance, S1E gives 12.
Okay.
Yes. So it all depends on every municipality has to have a policy. And remember, a policy is something that the municipality directs it to how it does its things.
Right.
It is different from a bylaw. Because a bylaw is a law.
Yes, okay.
And it implicates the consumers and the responsibility upon the consumers. But a policy is a policy of the council and the administration that has to execute.
Okay. No, I get it.
Yes. And talking about the free basic services, Fourie did a research that actually found that municipalities are actually not allocating that free basic service, and the Auditor General was actually brought into the fold.
Well, that's why municipality has to have a means of determining your poorest of the poor and have them on a register and be able to see who are they supplying with free basic service. Because one thing that I found very interesting, particularly when Joburg Water was discussing, and they were discussing their loss, or let's call it non-income revenue through water. That includes free basic water.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So one must be very careful. So if you say that my losses are 30%, for instance, part of that losses is water that you provide free of charge. And it's not everything that's wasted through leakages. So it's very confusing for people to really understand what they're listening to when they talk about these things. If you're not able to understand what it's made up of.
So now when they get that money, you said it's from water, from electricity, from sanitation and sewage and property rates. They have this money in the kitty.
No. That's what they bill.
Oh, that's what they bill. Okay.
They don't have the money in the kitty.
Oh, okay. Then what happened?
Bill that we receive at every end of the month.
Yeah, right. Then that's when we get to the expenditure side of it. And part of your responsibility as a municipality is to have an expenditure category that says contribution to bad debt. And if you have a payment level, and that is calculated or supposed to be calculated over periods of time, and your budget, you must determine how much income are you going to receive to your bill. Now the bill, the revenue that you levy, is part of your income. That's accounting practice.
Right.
So you levy 100 rand, but you only get 95 rand in payment. So the 5 rand is an expenditure. So ultimately, even if you collect, the benchmark is 95%.
Yes.
So
yes.
in any case, you're not going to get all that money.
Yeah.
You must understand how much you're going to get.
Sure.
And that's all you can spend. And that's what makes it so difficult.
Maybe that's why there's always this argument that says that municipalities are struggling to actually even reach the 80% benchmark of collection.
But let's be realistic in understanding certain local municipalities. Let's differentiate between district and local. Some local municipalities have very few paying customers.
Yes.
They have largely non-paying customers, and I classify non-paying as being unable to pay, not illegal connections and stuff like that.
Yes.
It's people who can't pay.
Yes.
So the higher that level is in a municipality, the more you look at the demographics of the municipality, the lower that payment level will become. And that makes the municipality can't function.
Yes. So when we say it can't function, how does that now relate to the expenditure of the municipality?
Right. Then there's a very, very high responsibility on the municipality, because if we talk about a funded budget, and National Treasury measures that when you submit your budget, is the budget funded?
Yes.
And that means, did you understand the income?
Yes.
And that you can spend only what you have in that physical income.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you look at your expenditure, where do you spend it? And in a big metropolitan municipality, I can tell you 85% of that expenditure is fixed.
Cool.
And only 15% is a choice. And if you don't, as a municipality, look critically at your staffing structure.
Oh, yes.
At what other fixed costs you have. Do you pay bulk services? Do you have interest on loans?
Yes.
Those are all fixed
Yes, those are
expenditures. And technically, you should also have a fixed expenditure on repair and maintenance. But the moment a municipality comes into difficulties because they can't spend or they're unfunded, they cut on repair and maintenance. Because that's easy.
That explains why.
Right, so you have to pay interest on your loans. You can't get away from that. And then, as I said, the reserve for bad debt, that's part of your expenditure. You can't do anything about it. You have to account for it. And then it becomes incredibly difficult for the municipality to be able to deliver services if these fixed costs are unmanageable, or if they don't understand that there's something they can do about salaries, in the sense of looking at the organizational structure, understanding that, can I afford salary increases? Unfortunately, it's a decision that you have to come to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You're making me appreciate the role of everyone that works in a municipality that's involved in these decisions. And let me tell you, we're recording a stone throw away from Sandton, the most expensive square mile in
Johannesburg.
And I'm looking at those CEOs of those companies and the CFOs. I'm like, our own public officials and anyone that works in the municipality, I mean, they've got a bigger task than those ones. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Because they're navigating between funding for electricity, funding for health services.
The job of the CFO is incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. He or she has to also deviate between operational things and governance things.
Yes.
And if you look at governance...
And compliance as well.
Well, that's where compliance comes in. The compliance requirements in terms of reporting is incredibly strict. If you look at, I think, just the MFMA, we talk about more than 100 compliance reports in a year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the officials are complaining that's all they do is they report. But there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. But the challenge for the CFO is to pick up problems before the fact instead of currently after the fact.
Yeah.
Because they pick it up now once reporting is done, and that's after the fact.
Oh, yeah.
So it is really, really a very difficult job.
Yeah.
And you expect people with competence, you expect not only accounting competence, you expect people to be knowledgeable on local government, understand how it works, and be able to interpret what it is that they're doing.
Yes. Especially the legislation.
Especially the legislation.
Look, I mean, at a certain point in time, I packed in all the legislation to come with, and then I decided it's too heavy, I can't carry it all.
No,
and
on
it's little book
on top of the legislations, then there are circulars.
Exactly.
And the regulations.
But at least the circulars is a choice of a municipality. It's not compulsory.
Sure.
So National Treasury issues them as a guideline or as a target that you can work towards, but you don't have to do it because it's not compulsory. It's not.
Yeah.
You have to adopt it by council before it becomes illegal.
Let me take you back to, now we've spoken about what you could possibly collect from your customers. Now, with that money, then you get to a point of making a decision on what to spend your money on. Going back to my parents and the fact that they still do not have, they don't have water. How do those decisions come about?
Well, it really is a process. Let me put it this way.
Okay.
And it's not a short-term process.
Okay.
It stems out of the IDP.
Yes.
Because the IDP is a municipality's 5-year plan, and it's supposed to coincide with the elective term of a municipality. Now, I've always been of the opinion that what is really going to change in an IDP between one elective term and the next,
And another,
irrespective of what the politics look like, because this is the job that local government has to do. That's why I've also said I don't understand why it is difficult for a municipality to do things when the politics changes. The administration has got exactly the same job that they have to do. They can only act and change their way of doing if the policy of council changes.
Is it not perhaps because you were talking about the 15% that they can play around with? Is it not because Focus gets there?
That's telephones and stationery and things like
Oh, so it's not the big thing. Okay, I thought the contestation was
those
there.
are the run-of-the-mill operational expenditure. That really is that.
So now with this money, then they decide that, okay, do we then put a big bulk water pipe going towards this area? Do we repair and end?
Yes. Look, the repairs and maintenance is an operational expenditure.
Okay.
The infrastructure is a capital expenditure.
Yeah. And that money comes from what we pay as municipalities and
Operational expenditure.
operational expenditure. Okay. And the other?
So that's why you have to differentiate on your budget between an operational budget and a capital budget.
Okay.
The capital budget is aimed at projects, and it's aimed at creating an asset.
Yeah.
So your run-of-the-mill operational expenditures is telephone calls and paying for electricity, bulk services and stuff like that, because that's operation.
Right.
But the capital is supposed to be infrastructure and assets. So where does that money come from? there are a couple of sources. You can have, if you have surplus money on your operational budget, you can pay for capital assets. If you don't, you have to loan money to do that.
Oh, go to the bank.
That's the only, the bank and other
institutions.
And what about the grants, the conditional
Well,
grants?
that's part and parcel of how you fund the capital.
Yes.
Because all of those grants are what's the word I'm looking for? Prescriptive.
Oh, yeah.
They are conditional.
Maybe
grants.
that's why they call conditional. Yeah.
Yes. So you could only spend that money on what was originally agreed on that project.
Okay.
Then you can get the money.
Okay.
Otherwise you can't get the money.
And this money comes from, those grants come from Treasury,
Yes,
National
they come
Treasury.
from National Treasury. So if you look at the total spectrum, what money a municipality receives from national fiscus is the equitable share,
Yes.
the fuel levies that the metropolitan municipalities get, and then the conditional grants. There's a couple of grants that is operational, but it's very small.
Okay.
It's mainly for capital projects and for the creation of assets to assist. But they specify exactly you can only do this and this. Can't do anything more than that. You can't change that money and spend it.
Use it for something else. Yeah. Although I must say there have been examples in the past where that has happened.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely. And in some municipalities, the National Treasury always actually comes back and says that we are taking back this grant because you've not been able to spend it, and there's a high possibility that you will not get another.
How does that come about when you can't spend the money?
Well, now you touch on the supply chain process. Okay, and maybe it's something that is a deterrent for municipalities.
Yeah.
Very prescriptive, and you have to prepare in advance.
Yeah.
So if you're not
Planning for procurement.
if you don't plan in advance, you won't be able to get the tender out and consider the tender before the work can be started. So if you're not ready, if you don't understand these projects are going to be included in the budget, so I have to prepare in advance for my specifications of this specific project. So if 1 July happens, then I can immediately go out on tender, and I know it's a period of time before a tender gets allocated, and then I can spend the money.
Yes.
So if the municipality dawdles in the pre-preparation phases, they are only going to be starting on this project next year, after January, and then they can't spend the money.
Okay, let me give you another interesting case. There was a project that I was asked to get involved in. It was the reviewing of an LED strategy in one municipality. But I was not going to get involved as a service provider. I was just going to get involved as a person who would assist the municipality to look at whether the strategy that had been reviewed is actually talking to local government needs. I said, no problem, call me when the project is done.
Yes. That I wanted to say to you, they have to go through the supply chain. Exactly. So, absolutely. You can't do anything without the supply chain.
Yes.
And that's where it becomes so important. The supply chain process bars councillors from participating in any part of that process. So the administration and the bid specifications and the bid evaluation and the bid adjudication committees have to be objective.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And may not be interferent. In a way, you cannot tell we prefer this supply or that supply. Sorry, there's the specifications. It has to be measured against the specifications. So if your specifications is not clear on what it is that you want, you can't do the project.
Let me get your view on something, because Tina and I were talking earlier on about capacity in municipalities and to deliver, whether it's OPEX or CAPEX. And an ordinary man on the street has been fed this thing that says, oh, municipalities are not delivering because we don't have enough engineering skills in our municipality. But you bring in a different angle that says there are other processes that even if you can have the adequate number of engineers, you might not be able to deliver on the project on time.
Well, look, the specifications are obviously compiled in-house.
Yes.
So you need expertise in that particular field to be able to draw up specifications for the purpose of what you want to do it. But once it goes out to tender, the person who you appoint as the project execution has to be able to deliver.
Yeah.
Then there's an oversight responsibility from the municipality side to monitor whether they are doing that. And it concerns me in particular that municipalities pay for services and it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
That means nobody is providing any oversight over the project. They're not monitoring what the contractor is doing or anything like that. Because how can you pay for something that you don't have?
Which checks and balances are supposed to be in place?
And obviously there should be a project manager in-house to oversee what's happening through the... And it's interesting, and I'm going to touch on something which is very controversial. And that is the use of subcontractors and the use of sourcing out, getting
consultants.
No, members of the public to assist community members.
Okay.
If your original project specification does not allow for subcontracting, the project cannot subcontract.
Yeah. Oh, do we find instances where...
Yeah, well, that's part and part. A lot of the times you get a project starts, they call it mafia or whatever, then they demand from the contractor that they give
30%.
So
phenomenal.
We at SA Cities Network, we were interested in this phenomenon of what you call construction mafias. First of all, mafias in any country where they exist because there's a group of people who have been disenfranchised, right? So in looking at this, and we were talking to municipal practitioners across the country, two things that we find out is that, one, our supply chain policies and our economic development policies are not talking to each other.
Yes.
And you're not going to solve the issue of construction mafias by bringing in the police.
In our local economies, is the dependency on the local government state as an employer for communities. That idea on its own.
I think over the
Because even with the EPWP projects as well and programs, you find that EPWP workers, they want to be heard.
Let me tell you a funny story. So when I got a job at the municipality, and then I left the municipality, I had
to ask why.
Let's not go there. I had family members who called me, cousins, and be like, "Why are you leaving Municipal? Because that's where you're supposed to retire." Like, everyone was shocked that I left the municipality, because everyone is aspiring to go and work for the municipality. That's where you settle. That's where everyone wants to be a municipal official. At least there's a certain group of people that think like that.
Well, and then I'm just going to also ask you a question that is related to that with the National Treasury regulations, particularly when it comes to the wage bill. How does it affect municipality?
Well, they have a benchmark which ranges between 25 and 40% of your expenditure should be your remuneration and the contributions of both employees or officials and council. So, but now you must understand, I'm in a big municipality. I provide lots of services, like a metropolitan. If I spend 40% of that budget, I can't be equated to a district municipality that doesn't deliver many services. It's mostly in-house and it's mostly administrative. It's not out there in the field. They're not going to spend almost only 40%. They're going to spend much more.
Makes sense.
Because they don't have other expenditure that lowers that percentage. Because that's why I said in the beginning, you have to be so careful when you have organizational structure that you don't inflate it. Because it becomes unaffordable if you don't understand that. And even in a district municipality, they must understand why do they need services? Why do they need employees to do things? Because, I always, I have a giggle sometimes. When I entered into local government, it was for life.
Yeah.
It was the approach that you had. You need to go and work there. Your allegiance is to your employer. You work until you retirement age. You are dependent on your retirement savings, etc., etc. That was the idea. It changed. It changed completely, with people being free to move around and have their own security in terms of the future. But the government as a whole has been seen to become the employer. And they are not from central, provincial or local. They're not supposed to be the principal employer. They're really not. The economy is supposed to provide employment.
You know what I'm getting through this discussion so far is that you cannot divorce economic performance of the country from the ability of the municipality to perform its functions.
Absolutely, because that economic activity filters down, whether you look at the national level, because how does it make up a national one? It's through provinces and what happens in local government. So if there's no economic development and there's no growth in employment and stuff like that, municipalities are going to have a problem.
Absolutely.
Because people will get, more and more people get into a situation where they can't pay for services. And then you expect them to, if they are law-abiding citizens, to live within the free basic service right, because that's covered in the Constitution of saying that that is a human right. And less people being able to afford paying for it. So the paying people gets less and the non-paying people gets more. And then how do you reconcile? In any realistic anticipation, how do you become a funded organization with all the responsibilities that you have to provide? So it's a very tricky thing. So it's important that the IDP recognizes where this municipality is going to and what do they want to achieve. It's not only, and it's amazing, if you look at the objectives of municipalities in the IDP, it's pretty much the same.
Whether you are in a small municipality or a small municipality.
Absolutely.
Earlier on, you were talking about the 5 years, and you were saying that maybe the 5 years is not long enough. There's very few things that can change in 5 years. And I do know that municipalities, at least the big ones, they've got what is called city development strategies or GDS, whatever they call them. Do you think that there's value in those to influence the 5-year decisions?
What are they focused on? Are they focused on land development? Are they focused on that type of development? Or are they focusing on economic development? Because there's a difference. And I find that many things focus on development in a practical sense of having processes that you have to go through when you want to change the zoning of your property, or whether you want to buy it goes through certain processes. But is that process aimed at
growing the economy? Okay.
No. So it is important that it is, to me, a certain automated process. If the growth happens in the country as a whole, municipalities will benefit.
Sure.
Because in a municipality is where everything happens. And we are border-to-border municipalities in South Africa. So everything happens within the boundaries of the municipality, of sunshine. So whatever strategy they have at a national level filters down.
Help me now understand. So we've spoken about where the municipality gets is supposed to get its money from, and how it spends it. They allocate it to capital projects or operational projects. These are in this process. Where do my parents feature? How can they participate? And who else is involved in these discussions?
I've come to the conclusion, you read it between the lines and in specific in the Constitution, that there are three primary stakeholders in the municipality. The administration, because they have to do the job.
Yes.
The council, because they are the governance authority. They are supposed to set the framework within which the municipality is supposed to happen. And the IDP has to give guidance for that, and that has to translate into a budget. Where do you spend your money? Right. And the third category is the communities. And I'm afraid that over a period since 2000, when all of this changed, very little attention is given to capacitate communities.
Yeah.
They invite you to meetings and you're supposed to go, but do you really understand what's happening? If you don't capacitate you see it through these community groups where they make comments and you think, where did it come from? That's not what they're supposed to do. It's because they don't understand.
Absolutely.
And even you mentioned ward committees.
Yes.
I'm gonna be very naughty and talk about councillors as well. They don't understand what they're supposed to do.
Oh yes.
I mean, if you want to become a councillor, and I ask you, have you read the Structures Act, the Systems Act, the MFMA? If you're in the finance, have you read it?
And do you understand it?
Do you understand it?
No.
But whose job is it to make sure that
The
people...
political party is supposed to be very vigilant in how they select.
Okay.
Now, who gets elected? That's the community that has to do that.
Yeah.
But at least try and see that you get people involved in municipalities at a council level that understands what it's all about.
Yes.
It really isn't.
And in fact, it's one of the main pointers around financial management and oversight, where you find that local government, particularly local municipalities, they keep on getting these bad audit outcomes. So, but accountability, the exercising of accountability and oversight.
Well,
I was about to ask, because I know that there are so many committees. There is MPEC, there is sections, whatever.
And there's an audit committee as well.
What's going on?
And you also have somebody like you who served as an MMC at some point. Now there's a debate whether MMCs also have to exercise an oversight role, or we leave it to the council committees and its chairpersons to exercise that oversight role.
Look, MMC is a member of the Executive Mayor's Committee. There's no physical legislative responsibilities.
Okay.
Except to support the mayor, if there's an executive mayor, to support the mayor in the various topics.
Yes.
So as the MMC is
So in MMC, for example, like if we have to use the national government as an example, the MMC would be like a minister in the cabinet.
No, it won't be.
It wouldn't be.
No.
So what are their roles and responsibilities?
They advise the mayor.
They just advise.
Yes, because the mayor has legislative responsibility.
Are we saying presidents are not advisors?
No, let's leave it. I'm definitely not going to go to the national level.
Because
Or
really,
even to the provincial.
I'm just trying to find this accountability, linkage between MMCs as part of the executive and council and the committees that they're supposed to be accountable to.
Council is the governance body.
Sure.
And they have the legislative and compliance responsibility of a municipality. That's their duty. So they obviously appoint and they select executive mayors. And let me start off by saying a municipality is established in a certain way. It is established with an executive mayor, or it's established with an executive committee. Right. And
Depending on the times.
right. Now, you can change that, but it's a process that you have to follow. All right. It's the province that decides, yes, you can change, or no, you can't change. So if you take a municipality that is established as a ward participatory municipality with an executive mayor, let's take that example. Then the executive mayor has very specific financial responsibilities in terms of the budget, in terms of the IDP, in terms of the STPIP, in terms of performance agreements of senior management, very particular. And his or her committee, mayoral committee, is appointed by the mayor to help him to do that. All right. So
So an MMC for finance, since we're talking about finances, they're supposed to provide support and advice to the mayor on financial matters.
yes, but there's a
What about monitoring finances?
that's where council committees come.
Oh, okay. And which of these committees of council is responsible for that? Is it all of them?
Well, the legislation talks about finance oversight committees. Obviously, impact is now part of the Structures
What's
Act.
MPAC?
Municipal Public Accounts Committee. And I can be naughty to tell you, I don't know how a councillor can be responsible for implementing and overseeing.
At the same time.
Anyway, that's the way it is. But they're supposed to have. That's why the mayor and the speaker and the chief whip can't be a part of it, because they are supposed to oversee what happens. But now here's the difficulty: every committee of council, whether it's an oversight committee for finance, whether it's an oversight committee for something else, is always retrospective. So it's after the fact.
Yes.
Then the MMC plays a role of having to account of why this oversight looks like this.
Yes. Yes.
What has happened? So you have to be up to speed with what is happening in finances to be able to contribute to that committee. But there's a big but. And the but is that no politician is allowed to interfere in the administration. I cannot give directions to anybody as an MMC or a politician. So in a certain sense, if you don't have the confidence of your senior management in that department to talk to you on a regular basis of understanding where it is going wrong. Unfortunately, I had that. So it was much easier because it was a confidence situation. Because I understood what they were busy doing. But if you have a politician responsible for finance and they know nothing about finance, they are not going to have the confidence of that officials or the municipal manager to share. Because that's all that you end up doing is you sharing. You can't direct. You can ask a question, why aren't you collecting debt? What? But you can't interfere, of course, as a politician. So the oversight is done at council level, whether they have one committee or 10 committees, doesn't matter. They are oversight and they are retrospective.
Okay.
The audit committee is an independent committee. No councillor, not the municipal manager, nobody in the municipal structure is part of the audit committee. You have to appoint external. And if you appoint correct people, they are qualified to be able to assist you during the course of the year to ensure it gets done. But again, here's the problem. Currently, the administration, the operational things are digitized. But the governance part, understanding what the impact of this is not. That's in a paper. So the administration draws up reports. They don't get a early warning system.
Preemptive.
And that's where the audit committee can assist. Very, very specific.
In fact, audit and risk management becomes very important.
The example of that is, I know I was at some point in my life responsible for establishing an enterprise program management unit. And if you have these plans, and if we were to go with what you're saying, imagine a situation where you come up with a plan of these are the projects that would implement, and if it's digitized and everyone can see how far this project is, it allows for transparency among other things and accountability, because it's not a word report that I pass down to you and
but
nobody
you can manipulate
that I can
and just report on what I want to report on. Yes. No, there is a big gap. And it's interesting, and without going into any particular details, I know that there are people who are trying to get funding who's got a very solid program that can assist municipalities in the governance side of a CFO, but it goes to the now you can't see my face. But it really is. It will help municipalities tremendously if they get an early warning system. Hang on a minute, look at this. It's not happening the way that it's supposed to happen.
And how much
I can interfere in time.
How much of that is supposed to be communicated with an ordinary member of the public, especially when it comes to projects and how far they've gone?
Well, they're supposed to report on that, on projects, but again, it's after the fact.
Okay.
So when a finance committee sits, even if they sit monthly, they consider a report of a month prior. And that Section 71 report is very prescriptive on both operating and capital, but it's historic. It's not up to date.
So this report gets compiled, historic as it is, and I reside in Ward 53, and there was a water project that was supposed to be implemented.
Yeah.
My councillor sits at council. They process these reports quarterly, whatever. Is it the job of my ward councillor to now come and tell us that, listen, your project has not started because the tender was not responsive, so it might be delayed as much as it is in the IDP?
Well, that's one way of doing it.
Okay.
There's a responsibility of council to place certain information on a website.
Okay.
Now, obviously a website is if a municipality can afford to have a website. I think most municipalities do have a website.
Yes.
Now, the moment you have a website, it's not just the budget document and the annual financial statements or the annual report that gets put on the website. It's these in-year reports also again. So that's where the responsibility of communities come in. They need to look at those things. If I'm a participant, if I'm an important stakeholder of what is happening in my municipality, there's a responsibility on me to capacitate myself.
Oh, but
Two sides.
can I just say, I just wish that these things would be simplified. I mean,
I agree,
because it's written in technical language, and sometimes your capital project, the list is so huge to even try and find the project that talks to my ward.
So your ward councillors has to make a contribution to that.
And most probably, what we can actually think about in the future is to actually look at the way in which we can produce small little pamphlets or small little documents that are really compressed, that really highlights the procedures that are taken when we are doing budgets, the accountability processes as well, and how communities can participate and simplify it. Yes, probably we could do that in the future. But unfortunately now we're running out of time, Marelize. I mean, we can talk the whole day about local government finances. And the good thing is that you are able to connect it back to the citizens, the institution of local government and finances, and how it connects to the citizens and what role citizens can play and the role that councillors ought to play as well.
Really, I'm very grateful that there is certain civil organizations that is working towards that objective of capacitating citizens to understand what they must look at, what does it mean, but it's a process.
Yes,
it is a process, and unfortunately it wasn't a focus area right in the beginning. Municipalities think, I have a meeting, I invite the community. If you don't come, you don't know. If you come, I give you what I want to give you.
No, thank you so much.
I have two things to say to my parents.
All right.
With my parents. So mom and dad, instead of asking your grandkids to teach you about TikTok, go to the municipal website. That's where you're going to find the information. Number 2, participate in the processes of the municipality. But also my plea to my former colleagues in the municipalities is to also make this information more accessible, in different languages, in different formats, because not everyone has gotten access to the website.
No, that's true. That's very true.
Absolutely.
And one tend to get more interested in what's happening in your environment when you get older. Unfortunately,
Yes.
the younger people.
Yeah. But of course, in the next episodes, we'll start
We'll talk about that, how to improve participation, and especially given the fact that people don't want to go to town halls anymore. They want to engage differently. But thank you so much for taking your morning to have this discussion.
Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope I could add something.
You definitely. Thank you.
Well, folks, we've now come to the end of the podcast. Please look out for us for another episode 6, where we'll be really delving into municipal audit outcomes, and we're going to bring you a very special guest. But on this note, let me thank EPF, Empire Partner Foundation, who is our major sponsor for this podcast. We appreciate that, and please do subscribe on the link at the bottom when you watch this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.